Hello and welcome to the Alaska Report. Today we have yet another of my favorite Alaska reports. This is an opportunity for you, the viewers, to meet some of the great Alaskan young men and young women that come back to Washington, D.C. during the summer to join us in the office to work here in the United States Senate on behalf of you all. It's a great opportunity for them. They're able to come back, experience life in Washington, D.C., life in the United States Senate. They do jobs around the office, have an opportunity to shadow me, learn a little bit more about what it's like to be here in the Senate. It's just a great opportunity. It's good for us in the office, too, because it's a burst of enthusiasm and energy during the hot summer months. So today we have an opportunity for these interns to ask me some questions. This is their shot to put me on the hot seat for a moment, but it also gives me an opportunity to introduce them to you as you watch our show. So with that, I'd like to welcome all of you. We've got 10 just recently graduated high school seniors who come to us from all over the state. So what we'll do, Cameron, we'll start here with you. And if you can introduce yourself, say where you are from, and you're in a little unique situation because you're not just a recently graduated high school student, but introduce yourself and then go ahead and ask me your questions.
Okay. Cameron Hinton, Anchorage. And my question is that seeing the effects of climate change in Alaska, where villages are being washed away by the ocean and permafrost melting, leading to the encroachment of the spruce beetle, what are Alaskans currently doing, and what can they do in the future to prepare for or alleviate the effects of climate change?
Well, there's a couple different questions. To prepare for climate change and to adapt to it are probably two different approaches. And as you know, there's great debate here in the Congress about how we deal with climate change. How do we make meaningful reductions in our emissions and perhaps curtail what we're seeing, particularly in a state like Alaska, where we do see the effects of climate change. There is much that can be done. We can be more proactive just in terms of the energy that we use. We're working here in the United States Senate towards building an energy bill that I think will be helpful for the country, not only in terms of our energy usage, but just energy policy in general. We can do more to be less reliant on those fossilized fuels that may contribute to greater carbon emissions into the air. We can look to renewables, alternative energy sources, whether they be geothermal opportunities like we have out in the Naknek area, or the potential for ocean energy that we see throughout so much of the state. Within the state, I think Alaskans can be more conscious of the energy that they use. I think we recognize that conservation and efficiency are probably some of the easiest ways that we reduce our reliance on fossilized fuels and those fuels that do bring about emissions. So there is more that we individually can do, and certainly from the legislative perspective, you're seeing a lot of activity back here in Washington, D.C. Nice to have you with us, Cameron. Sharon.
Sharon Merritt from Good News Bay. How would you suggest increasing the amount of jobs in rural Alaska?
Well, Sharon, as you know, coming from a small community like Good News Bay, jobs are necessary. They're important. It's difficult to remain in a village, in a community that is off the road system, if you're not entirely reliant on a subsistence lifestyle. But even if you are, the reality is you've got to have the cash to buy the fuel, to put into the snowmobile or the four-wheeler, or to provide for an airplane ticket to go get medical services, to provide for an economic base in our smaller communities has always been very, very challenging. I think one of the things that we're seeing in Alaska that's affecting that are the high energy prices. And I spoke with Cameron a little bit about what we're doing within an energy bill. We've got to be doing more to help our smaller communities afford energy. When you are powered off diesel and you're paying the fuel costs that you are paying, it's very difficult for the families to remain in a community. So we're trying to get a handle on that, whether it's smaller solutions like a small geothermal or wind, again, some of the more innovative concepts that are out there. We have to do better. We also need to recognize, though, that when jobs do come to a community, it's necessary that those within the community have the training for the jobs. So we need to make sure that we're doing more to help facilitate the training opportunities, whether it is training to go up north and work in the oil fields, or whether it's training to be a barge operator or pilot up so many of our rivers in western Alaska. So there's a combination of factors. We've got to make it affordable to live out in the communities so that people stay out there, and we've got to be able to ensure that we've got the training opportunities as well. Thanks. Kyle.
I'm Kyle Marston from Anchorage, Alaska, and I was wondering, a natural gas pipeline has been proposed for the last decade, and I was wondering, do you think this project will become a reality in the next 5 years?
Well, Kyle, I think it's fair to say that all of us in Alaska are anxiously awaiting and doing all that we can to help facilitate bringing Alaska's natural gas from the North Slope to the rest of the country. This is important for us as a state and our economic base, but also to meet our energy needs as we discuss in these questions. There are some real obstacles I think we recognize. Our geography separates us from the main market. The price of gas is it's good for those who are consuming it, but it's not necessarily good for those that are looking to build a $30 billion project. Do I think it can be done in 5 years? I believe that we are making good progress with the gas line. We have two competing entities, one under the AGEA proposal, one is the Denali project, and both of these are advancing. We have a ways to go, and I think we appreciate that. But I think, again, the imperative is we have a resource that the rest of the country needs and wants. We as Alaskans need to figure out how we help facilitate that project to get this important resource to the markets. So I remain optimistic. We have worked hard at the federal level to make sure that whatever appropriate federal incentives we can put in place have been in place. And in this energy bill that I mentioned, we have increased the loan guarantee that will help with the financing. We've got some other provisions in there allowing for access to the Federal Financing Bank. These things all help when you're dealing with a multi-billion-dollar project as we are with the gas line. But we're all anxiously working towards the same goal. Thank you. Callie.
Hi, my name is Callie Klein from Ketchikan. Senator, you were the first female elected to Congress by the Alaskan voters.
Well, I hope that I am the first of many female leaders who will serve in the Congress representing the state of Alaska. As we know, we celebrated our first governor with the election of Governor Palin. I will tell you, though, I think that we can do more when it comes to encouraging women, and particularly young women, to be part of the elective process. I would like to see more women in our Alaska State Legislature. When I served in the legislature, the numbers, and this was 10 years ago, the numbers of women in the House at that time are the same number that we have now, 10 years later. That number should be moving up. So we need to do more, I believe, to help encourage young women and young men as well. We need to do more to encourage minorities. I think we need to make sure that there is a level of outreach and a level of encouragement that our representative bodies actually look like the population that we represent. So we got a ways to go, but we'll be working at it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Kyle Worrell from Anchorage. What are your views on environmental change and what we should do about them?
Well, environmental change is a big subject, a big topic. I do believe very strongly that as we work to grow our state, as we develop our state, that we always do so with a consciousness of our environment and the impacts of our environment as a consequence of that development. I am a strong believer that development and care for the environment are not mutually exclusive issues, that we can be a strong state economically, and we can still live in the most beautiful state in the country. We can have both. Now, when we talk about environmental change, it kind of loops back to Cameron's question here about the issue of climate change and what we're seeing with our environment as there are these external forces that are at play, whether it's increased carbon emissions into the air, or whether it is just Mother Nature doing what she will that is having an impact on our environment. I think we recognize that there has to be a level of adaptability and an awareness that as our environment changes, change doesn't always necessarily have to be a bad thing. But we need to be conscious of how we work with that environmental change, how we are able to adapt, and when appropriate, to mitigate. Thanks. Miles, you're up.
Miles Reeder from Nome. What are your thoughts on the future creation of a road or railroad through western Alaska, connecting it to the rest of the state?
Well, you know, it's a big dream, it's a big idea, but that's kind of how Alaska came about, was through big dreams and big ideas. We recognize that a road from, say, from the Fairbanks area in the interior across to Nome would be an extremely expensive undertaking. The estimates out there are a couple $2 billion. And once you build a road, you're not done with the expenses of the road. The operation, the maintenance, coming from Nome, you get some drifting snows coming through, and all of a sudden you have a road that may not be passable. So I think it is something that is worthy of discussion. We need to appreciate that so much of our state is not accessible by road. And when we are able to connect, whether it is by road or by river or other means of connectors, all of a sudden you can engage in a level of commerce that you haven't had before. As you know, air transport in and out of Nome is not cheap. So is it reasonable to look at other alternatives? I happen to think that rail is underutilized in this state, and that would be a good opportunity for us to explore. So even though it's a big idea and it's an expensive idea, I don't think that we should let the enthusiasm for a project like that taper without really looking into it. Now, having said that, I can tell you, given the deficits that we're facing right now, it's not a project that's going to get underway soon, but we've got a lot of miles within this state that are yet untracked, and being able to connect our communities in the future one day, I think, is a worthy goal. All right, we're now up to the back row here.
Elam Howe, Fairbanks. When representing a state as diverse as ours, with where there are so many variations in cultures, lifestyles, needs, how do you factor in those differences when making decisions in the Senate, especially on huge issues such as the new energy and healthcare solutions?
It's not easy. It's not easy. I represent a state that is, you know, it's 1/5 the size of the whole country. When you superimpose Alaska on top of the rest of the 48 states, you know, you look at it, and my area of representation is enormous. I go from Maine down to Florida. You know, if you count all the way to the chain, you're halfway across the country. And so representing all of the areas and just recognizing the diversity through the geography, then throw in the diversity of the cultures, it is a tough task. But you keep that in mind with every issue. I'll use a specific example. We've been working on healthcare reform, very, very important. Well, one of the things that I have been keyed in on as I look at this draft legislation, how will this impact a state like Alaska that is so rural? The rural definition in the rest of the lower 48 doesn't fit in Alaska. When you don't have roads, when the only way in and out is by aircraft or by boat to connect you to another hub. And so there has to be an appreciation, a keen appreciation of how a state that's so intensely rural is impacted by federal legislation that is kind of a one-size-fits-all. We saw this with No Child Left Behind. You take a federal law that affects education and you say, well, we expect it to work as well in New York as in Newtok. That's close to impossible. So I've got to look at everything through the lens of, all right, we've got communities that are connected by road system, and we call them urban. Anchorage and Fairbanks are most certainly urban. But, you know, the whole population of the state of Alaska is about less than the population in Seattle. We've got it spread over 1/5 the size of the United States. I think I probably have one of the more difficult jobs in terms of representing a constituency, but I wouldn't trade it for anybody else's state in the Union. It's a tough job, but you do try to balance it all. It was kind of a non-answer to your question, Elam, but I think it demonstrates the complexity of where we live. Dana.
Dana Betts, Kenny Lake. As one of only a few women senators, what challenges do you find within the Senate?
Well, I would like to say that our numbers in the Senate are improving in terms of the numbers of women that are here, and in fact, we're getting a little bit better. We're about 16%, and that's an improvement from when I first came. When I came, I think I was number 12. I was actually the 33rd woman to serve in the United States Senate in the whole history of the Senate. In the whole history of the Senate, 33 is not that very many. So we're making a little bit of headway. But think about that. We're at 16% in the Senate right now. Well, last time I checked, female population in this country was, you know, was about 50-50 male versus female. I may be off by a couple percentage points. I'm not entirely certain. But our representation in the Senate and in the Congress is nowhere near what I think it should be. Does it make it that much more difficult? I will tell you, I have not experienced any pushback from my male colleagues and any sense that because I am a woman it is any different than what my male colleagues experience. I have the respect of my colleagues, both male and female. But I do believe that that coming to this body where you represent your constituency, that we all have something to offer. As a mother of teenage boys, I may have a different perspective on, say for instance, how No Child Left Behind works, simply because I was a PTA mom before I came to be in the United States Senate. I'd sit down and I'd talk to the teachers, I'd talk to my kid's principal, and I'd say, well, how does this actually work here? And I would see it in what was going on within my school. So I brought to the Senate the perspective of a mother, of being an attorney, of being a state legislator, and a perspective as a female. I think it's important that we all bring that unique perspective that we have to share in this representative body. Thanks for the question. Sam.
Sam Horton, Kodiak, Alaska. Senator, you were opposed to the health care bill that was passed recently by the executive branch and majority party in the Senate. What alternative did you have in mind to the health care bill?
It's a good question, because health care reform is really on everyone's mind right now. We're working very aggressively here in the Senate. The House is also working to advance a bill. I serve on the HELP Committee, the Health, Education, Labor, Pensions Committee, and we worked through a draft legislation, spent about 3 weeks in committee to try to move through a 1,000-page bill that would cost over $1 trillion and yet not provide for coverage for all those that are uninsured. Of the 47 million that are uninsured, this legislation did not reduce the costs. It did not cover those, sufficiently cover those that are uninsured, and it did not help to really reform the healthcare delivery system. I believe very, very strongly that we must work to reform our healthcare system. In Alaska, we're seeing a situation where access to providers is exceptionally limited. In our largest city, we don't have doctors, providers who are willing to take new Medicare individuals. The bill that we were working on in the HELP Committee was one that was basically based off the Medicare model, just expand the reimbursement rate slightly. It made no sense to me to build healthcare reform off what I perceive to be a broken model, and that is Medicare. So what I'm looking for, and what I'm working with many of my colleagues who are very earnest about this, is how we can really work to change the delivery system so that we have proper incentives in place. We don't have to tax Alaskans and Americans for these health care benefits, that no one is denied coverage because of pre-existing injuries and conditions, and that truly our health care costs are contained. It's a great, great question. Parker.
Parker Hammonds from Anchorage, Alaska, and my question is, do you believe the current health care bill before the HELP Committee will help America with its current health care insurance problems? And do you believe the Democrats are trying to rush this bill through the committee process too quickly?
Well, and this is a good piggyback off Sam's question there, I don't think that the HELP Committee bill works. I am still reviewing what the House has put out. I have grave concerns about their approach and how they will pay for these health care costs by taxing not only small businesses that are the lifeblood of this country in terms of our economy, but many of the approaches that they have taken with a public option that I don't think is sustainable. I am concerned that what is happening is that the administration is setting an arbitrary timeline and saying, Congress, you must pass legislation out of the House and out of the Senate before the August recess. I haven't heard the statement that I want, which is, Congress, I want you to pass good health care policy through the Congress. That's what I'm working on. I think for us to set this up and say, there's a drop-dead date of August 7th, and you must make that happen by then, that doesn't necessarily yield us good policy. What I hope we're able to do is if we can move these bills through the committee so that there's an actual product out there that we can go home and during the August recess, I can travel across the state of Alaska, I can hold town hall meetings, I can ask people, I say, well, what do you think about this? Ask providers, will this work? Will this encourage you to take more Medicare patients? Will this help bring down our costs? Will this provide for a greater level of access? That's what I want the ability to be able to do. So I think the push right now is not helping the process, and it's not helping us craft good, sound healthcare policy. Good question. And Annie, you're last up.
Annie Bartholomew, Juneau. As Alaska's young people leave the state for more career opportunities and a lower cost of living, your constituency is becoming increasingly older. What kinds of, what kind of incentives have you considered to keep Alaska's young people within the state of Alaska?
Well, I'll give you a perfect example, and I'll use me as that example. When I was in college, as you all are about to do, I took advantage of the Alaska Student Loan Program to help fund my college education, and then when I decided to go into law school, I had the benefit of that student loan program. But then when I got out of law school, I had a lot of debt. And I was just starting out and didn't have the opportunity to make much money. But at that time, the student loan program in the state of Alaska had a loan forgiveness program. If you came back to the state and you basically worked in the state for a period of years, you could get up to 50% of your student loans forgiven. For me, as a young person coming out looking to start my career, it was a no-brainer. I wanted to come back to Alaska. It was my home state, but let me tell you, that financial incentive to come back home was a huge draw. Now we're starting to do that more and more. We've got some programs that if you go, for instance, in practice in an underserved area in certain professions through federal legislation that we have just passed in these past 18 months, you are eligible for loan forgiveness. I think that helps us. It helps us in a state like Alaska. You hear about the brain drain all the time. It is very real. And as much as I want you all to go out and have an incredible college experience and an opportunity, I want you all to come back to the state. We need to make sure that we have incentives in place to do that, but we also need to make sure that we've got a good, strong economy so that you can come back in the career field of your choice with job opportunities that will allow you to stay and raise your family as you have been raised in Alaska. Great series of questions. I appreciate it. Good inquiry. You can tell you've been paying attention to all that's been going on here in the Senate, and like the opportunity to field the questions from you. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you too have enjoyed the opportunity to meet some of Alaska's fine young men and young women who have joined us here in my office for the second session of our intern program. Look forward to visiting with you next time on our next Alaska Report. Thanks much.